police car rolls at 11 p.m. Both officers lay unconscious. One has a serious head wound, his brain exposed. On the other side of Timor Leste, you race to your control room. Your team works the rescue operation. You can get a Black Hawk airborne in 20 minutes. Tonight, you do it in 10. You study the maps on the wall, confirm the coordinates with the pilot. The Black Hawk radios through. They have the officers. But it's unclear if they'll reach the hospital in time. You take your first deep breath of the night. A former carpenter from Melbourne's eastern suburbs. You think, how did I get here?
Robert Jones is a carpenter by trade who grew up in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. He's also an aviation ground crew corporal in the Australian Army. Since leaving the Army full-time, he continues to serve part-time in the Army Reserve and is a full-time firefighter. And we just got a glimpse into his mind during an intense medical evacuation in Timor Leste, or as it was known then, East Timor. I'm your host, Nick Musgrove. I'm a film and TV writer, and this is How Did I Get Here, a podcast about incredible stories in the ADF. So how did the chippy from the eastern burbs of Melbourne become central to a high-stakes medevac in Timor-Leste? Let's find out. Robert, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Nick.
Great to have you here. I've got to ask, this sounds like it's not for the faint-hearted. We're talking a medevac life and death situation in the middle of the night.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So getting woken up quite abruptly by a phone going off and having to go raise alarm and get the unit up to go and enact that aeromedical evacuation was pretty full on. But the training we got all the way from the start of me joining the military all led up to that to make us pretty capable to get it done.
It all led to that moment. So let's set the scene. So what's happening in Timor at the time?
It was all on the back of a lot of things that happened in 1999 and 2006 when they got independence or were chasing independence from Indonesia. At the time, it was pretty well settled, but there was elections coming up and we were just providing a lot of support to the local people. But we were coming up to the end of our time in East Timor, but there was still a little bit of political unrest and the Timorese people still wanted some support from the ADF at the time. So.
What were your first impressions of Timor when you got there?
Very hot, very humid. I do remember the back of the C-130, the Hercules opening up and just that wave of humidity and heat coming in and just some different smells and sights and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, it was pretty extreme for me.
What's going through your mind when the Hercules opens up and you get your first glimpse?
Yeah, it was a bit of excitement. Definitely thinking, wow, this is, I'm here, I'm about to do something for real for my country, which is fantastic. But then also a bit of, the dauntingness of it all and, the anxiety around trying to make sure I do the right thing for the time period that I'm in country.
So what were you there to do?
So my role was primarily to provide the radio communications for the helicopters whilst around about doing different tasks, supporting both Australian and New Zealand troops in country.
Right, so the primary role there was to get those Black Hawk helicopters airborne as quick as possible when a call came through, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would get a call from our headquarters. We would then sound the alarm on our base and basically get the aircraft launched as quick as we can to go and enact that aeromedical evacuation support.
And where would you take people who did have a medevac?
Yeah, so the aircraft would launch as quick as it can. It would then head to the hospital in Dili and pick up some doctors and other medical team, and then it would fly out to go and collect the patients to then take them back to the main hospital in Dili.
Right, so you'd actually get the medical staff first sometimes?
Yeah, we'd have to go pick them up, or I think sometimes they would have been on base as well, but at night we had to go and pick up the doctors from the hospital and then take them out to the locations wherever we were needed.
Now, I'm sure some of this stuff you never could have imagined as a kid, but you did picture yourself as a kid being in the Army. You used to play Army, as I understand.
I did, yeah. So I was that kid that used to dress up in all the camouflaged uniforms and with the toy guns and run around with mates and in the backyard and whatnot. And I had a very good friend. We used to holiday at Barwon Heads every summer for 2 weeks, and me and him were both right into the Army, and we used to get dressed up and go out in the bush there on the bluff, if anyone knows the area, and used to muck around with our toy guns and play soldier. And I always had a passion for aviation, and with the passion for aviation and as well as the Army, I was able to merge them both together, which worked perfectly for me.
Now, you at school, you loved sport and you also enjoyed design and woodworking. Was it the woodworking that led to your calling as a carpenter when you left school?
It did, yeah. So to some extent, it definitely did. I was sort of going, I'm not really academic. I'm probably not going to go to uni, and I was definitely probably more of an active kid. So I did the carpentry apprenticeship for, I think it was just under 4 years, sorry. Got a little bit of an early release, and then decided it wasn't for me and was looking at other options for what I wanted to do in the future. And I had considered the Army a little bit earlier on, probably my first year of my apprenticeship, but decided to go back and look into it a little bit more. And that's when I saw the ads for Defence Force recruiting and decided to do it a bit more research, and that was it. It was like, I'm hooked, it's aviation and Army, and that's what I want to do. So,
on some level, do you think you were looking for a greater purpose?
I think I was, yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of the reason why the carpentry probably wasn't the best suited to me. It wasn't quite fulfilling what I was looking for with purpose in life and what I really wanted to achieve, which at the time I really didn't know either. So still being quite young and not sure what I wanted to get out of life at that stage.
Robert, you had a huge first year when you joined the ADF. Was it exhilarating, all the variation and opportunity that you experienced?
Absolutely, yeah. Going to different places, meeting new people, just the excitement of it all, to be around different equipment. Operating four-wheel drives, it doesn't sound that exciting, but it was, to be able to use military vehicles, and then you drive the Unimogs around, and doing that at night with night vision goggles, all that sort of stuff was pretty amazing. So
you're driving these military vehicles with night vision goggles on in the dark?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it was pretty phenomenal. So doing all different night driving, whether that be with them on or with them off, and just really basically just being out in the bush and forward driving all day on the course was pretty fantastic. So excellent way to learn how to operate vehicles in all sorts of different environments. And then once that was completed, I went and learned how to use the fuel trucks. I learned how to use the pumps on those and learn all the refueling processes and things like that within Defence Force.
And this is also that you can service aircraft?
Yeah, my primary role was just to provide those radio communications for the Army helicopters and then do a whole bunch of aviation administration. So that's in relation to flying programs, making sure we've got the correct fuel loads in the aircraft, loading the frequencies, the maps, all sorts of things in the aircraft. So a lot of technical data that goes into them as well.
Do you jump into the aircraft to do that? Are you putting a USB in and loading stuff up? How does it actually work
to
in
an
practice?
Extent. Yeah, so we have different devices and different means that we use to fill the aircraft. But we had not only frequencies but also the encryption on the radios that we loaded in. And then we had, I suppose they were called similar to USBs, but these big ones that used to go in with all the map data and the frequencies and all that sort of waypoint data that the aircrew need to go and conduct their flight.
So you mentioned encryption. That's obviously so that intel is for the eyes of the pilot or the related personnel only?
Yeah, exactly. So we just don't want certain people to hear what we're saying on the radios to give away any of what we're up to or where we're located, all those sorts of things. So we do put encryption over the top of that.
How many people would be involved in getting a Black Hawk airborne, for instance, when you're in Timor? So we had probably a contingent of around about maybe 300 people, I would say, which was filled with a number of tradesmen and, the ground crew mission support, the refuelers, the aircrew themselves, and then all our support around that with the administrators, our Q staff that help us out with all our equipment and parts and, you name it, all of our IT support. So there's plenty of people around to get these things moving and up in the air. Robert, you were deployed to Timor quite early in your career. Do you remember the moment that you got the news?
I do. So it would have been in October of 2011, so not long after I'd actually got to the unit. So I remember being told, hey, you're being considered and do you want to go to East Timor? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those things that everyone in the uniform wants to do is you want to go and deploy and do that job for real. I always used to use this funny analogy of, being a firefighter and never fighting a fire. Sort of what it feels like sometimes in defence where you're just constantly in this training churn and you just want to get out there and do it for real, which is something that you can jump onto with a deployment and, really learn how good you are or what you can do and what you're capable of. So it's really just being tested out in the field.
Do you look back at your involvement there with real pride, what Australia and the Australian Army has been able to do?
I do. I definitely look back on it quite fondly and saw definitely from my point of view in the work that we did and providing that medical support, which was fantastic because going there and seeing how remote some parts of East Timor were, it was really good that we could provide that support and get that extra care for people, which was fantastic because you just wouldn't have it otherwise. And yeah, it was good to be able to do that.
So let's dive into it now. So you get there, you're taken to a base, I presume. What happens next? Yeah,
so we went to what we called the H-pod. So that was just at one end of the Dili International Airport, and that's where we had set up. But first thing was to sort of get orientated with where everything was on the base. And we started to get to know what we were going to be doing with the team that were already there. So we were doing a bit of a handover with them for a couple of days, and they were showing us the ropes and where all the equipment was. And I think within about 40 minutes of that happening, we had our first AME job come through. So we were pretty much trial by fire straight off the bat and straight into it. So it was pretty exciting.
So returning to the moment, you get a call in the middle of the night that sends you straight into action. Yeah, talk me through it.
Yeah, absolutely. So in my dorm or living quarters, that was myself and one of my supervisors, and we were given a mobile phone, which is what the headquarters would call when we had to basically enact an AME. So that phone rang. We both sort of shot out of bed. He took the call and we knew it was on. So it was sort of getting dressed as quick as we could and then running over to basically sound the alarm to get everyone up and activated.
And what information did you have that had got you up and sounded the alarm? What had happened?
It turned out that it was a vehicle accident at the southern end of Timor Leste involving some police officers who had significant injuries. We didn't quite know the full extent of their injuries at the time, but information kept coming through as we were sort of preparing and launching the aircraft, and then obviously whilst they were in flight out to that area. So it turns out that they were quite badly injured. One of the police officers had a severe head injury and ended up having his brains exposed and whatnot, and he was rushed off to a local hospital for them to start surgery. So the aircraft landed, but the gentleman who was in surgery, the doctors knew that we were coming, and they ended up patching him up enough and wheeled him out to go basically, can you put this guy on the aircraft as well? He's not in a good way and we need to get him over to Dili for treatment also. So it made the operation turn into a very dynamic situation. So pretty full on being in the operations room and a number of people in there asking questions, talking over the top of each other, and I'm trying to listen to a radio to the aircraft, jumping between different radios as well, because we had satellite communication, high frequency communication, and UHF and VHF. So it was very, very challenging and very full on at the time.
It sounds like such a pressure cooker, that control room. Like, describe it to me. Is it a big room?
It's not. Well, the one we had in East Timor wasn't that big. It was probably maybe 2 metres by 3 metres, something on those type of lines. There was 4 of us in there day to day on doing normal work. And then that night we probably had about 5 or 6 people in there. So just the extra bodies definitely made it quite cramped. So definitely a lot of noise and there was a lot going on at the time.
How do you maintain sort of cogent thought processes when there's so much data to analyse and so many other voices in the room? How do you stay methodical?
I honestly don't know. I think it was just something that maybe came a little bit natural to me, that I was able to sort of just process what I was doing at the time, and that probably comes through the training as well. We do get trained exceptionally well, and even when I was going through my initial employment training, I probably did scenarios in training that were far more challenging than what I did on operations. So understanding what the role is, how we go about it, and really made it easy for me to sort of be in that situation, and having good support. Like my supervisor and my sergeants were all really good and definitely assisted in keeping the noise down as well. So it can get challenging, and they were quite good at going, hey, you need to step out and have that conversation. So there was those sorts of things happening in the background also.
It sounds like you did incredibly well. And did you actually get news on this occasion as to whether the 2 injured, they were police officers, made it to Dili Hospital?
Yeah, so we did get the news. So obviously the aircraft got them to the hospital in pretty quick time. So I think it was around about a 30-minute flight time to go from Dili down to where they were located. And then we actually found out a couple of months later, we did get a letter from the police themselves to basically say that, he survived and he's in recovery, and it all went quite well, all things considering. So it was very rewarding to get that news, and it was a big tick in the box for a lot of people on that deployment that, we're able to get out there and have a real effect on someone's life and, provide that support when it was really needed. So it was fantastic.
That would have been quite unexpected to actually receive a letter from someone that you perhaps didn't know whether they made it or not. And then all of a sudden you get word that they're recovering.
Yeah, it was really fantastic. And especially from the injuries that were described to us by the air crew and everything like that, when they got back, it was like a bit of a shock in a way that, he had recovered or was recovering and doing a lot better than anyone expected. So it was fantastic to hear.
So you may have quietly concluded, based on the severity of the injuries prior to receiving this letter, that he might not have made it.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're definitely having that thought. Considering he was wheeled out of an operation to get put on the aircraft to bring back, we're like, wow, he's probably got a lot of things going against him at this point in time. But yeah, the fact that I think our intervention and getting to proper medical care as soon as we did was probably a really key aspect of, the survival of that person.
Speaking of the things you were exposed to in the aviation world, you were one day in Townsville asked to prepare and redeploy a Land Rover in a rather unconventional way, as I understand.
Yeah, it was pretty exciting. I posted into Townsville in July of 2011 and then found out a couple of months later that I was being looked at or considered to potentially deploy to East Timor in February 2012. So it was a pretty exciting time. I had to do a few things, like we kept looking at a particular spot up at the high range training area on the maps, doing a bit of map reconnaissance. And then one day I was asked to grab, an axe and jump in a Black Hawk. So we flew up to the high range training area and landed right near Ben Lomond, which is the highest peak in the training area. And we got dropped off there just to basically clear a bit of a bigger area so we can get a Chinook in there the following week. So pretty exciting. We got dropped off and then the Black Hawk did a bit of a lap and a nice big flyover for us, nice and low, which was pretty exciting.
Right, so the first part of the mission, you were dropped off in a Black Hawk to prepare for the Chinook.
Yeah.
And then the Chinook actually took a Land Rover, like underneath?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so it was an unslung load. So we spent the whole week tying everything off to make sure nothing fell off or out of it and prepping everything we needed in it to go out and basically spend a week on top of that hill.
Was it a nervy moment when the Chinook took off and the ropes went taut and you had to watch to make sure that everything had been slung correctly?
Definitely from my point of view, because we basically got given a book and this is how you're meant to do it and prepare a rover to be underslung. We're like, okay, so we're sort of making sure hopefully our knots will stay and, we've strapped everything down as we needed to. So it's definitely a nerve-wracking moment, but we had really good support from the load masters who actually did a good once-over and checked everything for us.
Talk to me about election night in Timor. I know that was one of the primary reasons that you were there. Was it a lively night in the end?
It was a bit of a lively night. We definitely heard a lot more commotion. We knew it was coming up and we got sort of a bit of intelligence that there was definitely going to be some commotion, I suppose, in the local area with the election coming up. And I do remember being outside the night of the election and, hearing some gunfire and things like that off in the distance. But we were definitely in a position where we were quite safe, and we did have actually New Zealand infantry at the time providing support or security to our airbase. So it was fantastic.
In the true ANZAC tradition.
Absolutely, yeah. It was really cool to be deployed with the New Zealanders, especially over ANZAC Day. So that was a pretty special moment.
Right. So how did you commemorate ANZAC Day?
So we were fortunate enough that, we got together nice and early for the dawn service. I was actually responsible for the flags, which I felt was a bit of an honour, so raising and lowering the flags. And then we were lucky enough to have an allocation of 2 beers each. So we were just sort of having a good chat, telling all the worries and, just really being part of a good group, a good company and enjoying the day and a bit of a relaxing day, I suppose, compared to normal tempo.
You're now an Army reservist and a full-time firefighter, Robert. How do you balance both of those things? I can't imagine how you fit both in.
I'm pretty fortunate to have been selected to become a firefighter, and with the firefighting role, we do work a shift roster, which is 2 day shifts on, 2 day shifts on, 2 night shifts on, and then we actually get 4 days off. So I'm fortunate enough that around my roster, I'm able to fit in 2 days of Army Reserve work when I can. Obviously, family dependent if we've got the availability, but I generally do 2 days a week around my rostered shift work.
Robert, how flexible is life as an Army reservist?
It's very flexible. I'm very fortunate that I'm in the position I am with working from home with the Army Reserves. But I have to do a minimum of 20 days per financial year. I generally do 100, about 2 days a week, and I just engage with my unit. They're very flexible and very understanding of my role as a firefighter and my shift work, which is fantastic.
Obviously, as a firefighter, you'd have to be calm under pressure. Do you think all those experiences, like in Timor, really set you up to remain calm?
100%. Yeah, having the pressure of your OC standing behind you while you're talking on the radio and, that very dynamic environment, it definitely gave me the ability to take a breath, take everything in and sort of look at what's going on to then just start working away on the tasks that need to be done, most importantly.
I'm just fascinated how you can switch off after life, either doing what you're doing in a place like Timor or if you've been called to a fire. How do you switch off? What's downtime like for you?
Downtime is pretty good. I live in a great part of the world and there's plenty of opportunity to get outdoors and mountain bike, cycling. So I do a lot of stuff on two wheels. I've got to work towards getting another motorbike, but plenty of cycling at the moment, whether that be mountain biking or gravel cycling. And there was a lot of support I got through Defence, not only through the psychological services, but we did a lot of training and support with regards to how to handle it, so breathing techniques and all those sorts of things to help you calm down and be settled. So it was really worthwhile, that sort of intervention early on through my military career that sort of did set me up and be able to cope with those dynamic and stressful situations.
So it's been 14 years since you embarked upon your unique and incredible career in the ADF. Looking back, what words of wisdom would you give your younger self?
I should have done it sooner. That's honestly probably my only thing. I definitely did look at applying and joining the Army a lot earlier and I didn't. And that's probably the one thing I'd say is just do it. Get involved and do it. It's going to set you up a lot for success moving forward. So, yeah.
Robert, returning now to that little kid who used to play Army growing up, is the real life ADF as exciting as you had imagined?
It definitely had some pretty exciting times that I was very fortunate enough to be part of, whether that be from flying in the helicopters to doing pistol shooting and all sorts of things, firing grenade launching attachments off rifles, seeing explosions, just all the cool stuff that you think of, or that I was definitely thinking of as a little boy, was definitely something I was able to achieve in my time in Defence.
It lived up to the dream and more.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I have to ask, does your daughter ever play Army like you used to?
Definitely not to the extent, but, she will sometimes salute me and things like that and have a bit of a muck around. But, she's definitely not quite as full on as I was at that age.
Robert, thank you so much for joining us and thank you everyone for listening. To learn more about careers in the ADF, head to the link in the episode description and join us again soon for more incredible stories on How Did I Get Here?